Hello, everyone. Matt Volm, CEO and founder of RevOps Co-op, community of about 15,000 plus revenue operators from all across the globe. And today we have a couple of folks with us who are going to be talking all about the rise of revenue orchestration platforms and how they can actually help you scale faster, more efficiently, and more effectively. Rosalyn, I'll turn it over to you to get us started on the topic at hand around revenue orchestration platforms and how people here can leverage those to help them scale faster.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So, really given my passion for revenue operations and really being an evangelist for RevOps, I'm super excited to, dive into this discussion with Tana and with Ashley. But before we do, I want to just take a quick look at sort of the rise of revenue operations. As we take a step back and take a look at some of the key market trends, I think RevOps leaders have always faced a number of challenges, right? We all often feel like we are consistently behind and our to-do list is never ending. I think with the volatility of the market, the last 3, 4, I guess even 5 years or so, we've seen really a heightened need for solid, good, comprehensive operations, right? Really to support the end-to-end revenue process. I mean, you think back to 2020 when pandemic hit and things were shutting down and every single company had to pivot, right? And companies, I think, who had really strong operations were the ones who were able to do that much quicker, more efficiently, versus being towards the end of the year, September, and still trying to figure out what their new go-to-market strategy looks like. So whether we're in a growth market, if we're in a down market, or we're just in any kind of shifts, RevOps is at the center and we're going to be affected. And companies with this, again, strong operational infrastructure are the ones who are going to be able to not only pivot quickly, but make good decisions faster, and then pivot and shift over and swing over and do and actually execute upon those changes efficiently and effectively. So I think good news is that we're seeing companies adopt a RevOps model, with this one study showing that almost half of companies reported actually having this function, which is like 3x what it was reported previously. And so companies are also not only investing in RevOps, or at least moving to RevOps model, but they're also obviously heavily investing in AI, right? Which could unlock a lot of, I think, capabilities for us as operations professionals. So talking about AI, I mean, we should not be a surprise to anyone. We would be amiss if we didn't speak about AI in any event. But I think RevOps leaders are still facing the same challenges, right? Year over year, we have poor processes, misalignment across the teams, and of course, the dreaded data quality. Data quality issues is always going to be a top of mind. And interestingly, I think business priorities that we're seeing are still fairly similar, right? Year to year. But I think that what's changed is really that lens that companies are looking through is now one of driving durable revenue growth versus this model of growth at all costs, or even looking at just predictable revenue, right? We want durable, sustainable revenue. And so with these companies wanting this, we all want that, and it's easy to say, but how we get there, I think, is still distilled in those business priorities, core things like you want to increase pipeline, right? You want to have better sales performance. And I think the priorities for us as RevOps professionals, these things are always top of mind for us, but also data integration, right? And data management, technology adoption, right? Having confidence in your forecast, and then really being able to help the business not only be better aligned and effectively perform across teams, but also make those actionable decisions quickly and efficiently and also effectively. So these are really critical business priorities that I think RevOps can and really should have a huge impact on driving for the organization. So with that, I'd love to learn more about how, RevOps has really evolved in Ashley and Tana's organizations. But before we do that, I want to launch a quick poll we have to put one of those controversial questions that I think any RevOps event would not be complete without understanding. And this is a really simple one just to get a gauge from the audience. So which of these really describes the top pain point that you're facing now? So I think this is still in line with kind of the things that we're talking about around business priorities, but shifting from tactical to strategic is always top of mind, I think, for everyone. The functional silos, right? Driving alignment across the teams is always a big one. And as I mentioned just about market trends, is really that market volatility and the lack of having that predictable, sustainable, and durable revenue. And then the mandate to do more with less. Oh, I hate the do more with less, but you have to have that in there, right? I was thinking about do better, right? Do better. So, anyways, I think it's do better with less.
Yeah,
We'll
I think
give
it's
people,
we're always constantly on a journey to do more with less, aren't we? It's
yeah,
like it's just like being efficient. I don't know, maybe it's doing more with the same is a
yeah, yeah.
better way to look at it.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that it's also, I mean, I think that's constant for operations, right? Even when you get to a point where you feel like, hey, things are running really smooth, there's always ways to do better. So we'll
Yeah.
give folks just a couple more minutes and then we will end the poll here. Let's share the results. This is a pretty good split, right? The shifting from tactical and the functional silos and driving alignment and the mandate to do more with less is a pretty even split. The market volatility and lack of predictability, we've got some folks, 12% responding as that is one of the biggest pain points, which I think is also constant. I feel like, I don't know, Ashley and Tana feel, but I feel like it's been a constant. And not even only the last 4 or 5 years, I feel like almost my entire ops career. So really what I want to really understand, maybe, and we could start with maybe Tana, really how has the role of RevOps really evolved in your organization over the past few years? And what maybe new responsibilities or new focus areas have really emerged in your organization?
Sure. So RevOps has definitely evolved over just really as the organization has evolved and grown over the course of the past 5 to 7 years. It used to be like all of the operational teams under the chief revenue officer. And now, like, majority of my responsibilities are with our sales development team. And then it's all things to do with pipeline coverage, pipeline velocity, but just overall pipeline management. And to do that, it's really bringing the sales and marketing teams and the leadership teams and insights and analytics together just to that poll question, really to break down those silos so that it's a single source of truth that we can make decisions and determine campaigns, or how do we get more pipeline coverage by solution, by segment to achieve our bookings targets. So it's definitely evolved. And I would say RevOps at Workiva looks slightly different than probably the traditional form of revenue operations teams.
Got it. And so does your RevOps team really cover kind of end-to-end funnel? Because I think this is one of those questions around, I think even with that pivot for companies moving to having a RevOps function, a lot of times it's still kind of sales, sales and post-sales versus inclusive of top of funnel.
Mainly top of funnel, but so much of the analytics and insights are really the full scope of it. I think a huge area of opportunity that we do have is to fold in that customer success, but the value management team, it doesn't sit under revenue operations, but our alignment is slightly unique as well, that our organization is under the global VP of sales under the commercial operations realm. So it's all of the sales operations teams from value management, enablement, revenue operations, inside sales that sits under that commercial operations arm.
Got it. Got it. Ashley, what about for you? How has the role of kind of RevOps evolved in your organization?
Yeah, I think it's funny that Tana brings up where she sits in the organization, because I do think that a lot of this depends on where you sit. So at Brightly, we sit under our finance team. And when I joined Brightly, we didn't have a revenue operations team. We had a business operations team. And that team focused on sales operations, which was doubling as sales enablement at the time, marketing operations, comp and commissions, things of that nature. As we have grown and evolved over the last couple of years, we've really been shifting the focus to be more around data management, forecasting, overall revenue orchestration for the business. And a big part of that comes with owning and procuring all of our technology to support our sellers. And that is not something that we did historically. We've taken on a lot more of the finance focus versus the day-to-day tactical operations that we did when I joined the organization. And truthfully, I think that continues to evolve as our company gets bigger. So it's very interesting to me to see how everybody might approach revenue operations in a different way. For us, you can definitely tell it's very finance centric.
Got it. Got it. Awesome. Well, what are maybe Along those lines, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges that RevOps teams are really facing today as they try to drive? We've been talking about moving from tactical to strategic or driving
Yeah.
better, durable revenue.
Yeah, I think doing more with less is a really common theme for us as well that we talked about already. Our revenue operations team is small but mighty. And I think that as the organization continues to transition to more of that revenue operations focus, we also have to scale our team to be able to support that. I do think as a business, with rapid growth comes rapid change. And it's really important for me to be the voice for sales, to push back on those changes, or be the voice for finance to push back on those changes, to make sure that we have a true business need and we can show real ROI with the changes that come. So I think that it's about slowing down and understanding that any of the operational procedures that we need to change, any of the tech stack we need to procure really has value to the business versus just solving a need that might scratch the itch today. And I think that being in sales operations under revenue operations, I sit in a unique role to play to both sides of the fence and make sure that everybody's speaking and collaborating, and we are really making sure that whatever decisions we make are for the business as a whole and not just one department.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Tana, what have you seen? What are some of the biggest challenges that your team is facing or what other teams facing today?
Really similar to what Ashley had mentioned. And I think a different way to put like doing more with less is just how can we simplify our roles with increased expectations year over year? We're a very fast growing SaaS organization with expectations to increase 20% year over year. And so while you have continuous headcount constraints, how can you do more with less, right? Like, how can you produce 20% more with the same amount of people? And so it's how do you increase the efficiency and productivity of each of the individual people, whether it's an SDR or a field seller. And just like what Ashley said, like continuous evaluation of that tech stack. And I think one of the challenges that we see today is when we look at the tech stack, there's so many different tools out there that you can really take advantage of. But what I see is that there's a lot of overlap in some of those tools. And how do you identify? It's like one tool will do 9/10 of what you want, and then you have to purchase another tool to do like a third of it, but there's some overlap. And so, which we are using SalesLoft and a big fan of that, but just, and then to streamline that to the efficiency and productivity, how do you centralize your team so that they're in one centralized software that they're utilizing instead of going to different tools to utilize that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'm going back in-house now, and tech stack has been a big focus, right? Because I think to your point, a lot of times you join a company, you're like, okay, I have 30 different tools. And when you really start to map these out, you realize there's a lot of redundancy, right? And then there's some gaps that you're actually trying to fill that none of these tools actually help with. So yeah, big proponent of just moving more to platform versus kind of these point solutions, which I think everybody's been talking about quite a bit.
I have just a quick question for Ashley, and then actually for you, Rosalyn, and Tana on that topic of consolidation. Ashley, you mentioned, I think you said like with rapid growth comes rapid change. And I know if you think about within RevOps, a lot of what you're doing is constantly, I won't say like reinventing, but a lot of stuff is like building on top of or completely like rebuilding processes or tools or things that you've already built, right? So
Yeah.
as an operator, how should people be thinking about there's all these new things, especially now with AI and everything that's being thrown at them. And like you said, there's this notion of, is it an itch you're trying to scratch or like something that's more viable in the long term? So when people are faced with some of those decisions, any best practices on how to think through as they're evaluating solutions and making decisions on like, well, hey, this solution will, I don't know, cost us X in terms of maybe time and dollars, but it will essentially be, I don't know, invalid, or we'll need to redo it again in a certain period of time when things ultimately change again. So how should people be thinking about that aspect of like change management as
Yeah.
they're evaluating new solutions and rolling new things out?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question. I think change management is probably the number one thing that everyone forgets about when you are going through process changes or evaluations of what you should change. At the end of the day, when we make changes, we're making them to create a more efficient experience for our sellers and for our buyers. But that doesn't necessarily always means that the change management is going to be easy or it's going to be adopted. And so, what I try to do whenever I'm evaluating a new technology or even just an optimization within our database, like Salesforce, for example, we always evaluate the business need and what we are trying to accomplish, as well as what our desired state would be. And then, most importantly, do we feel like this is a 3-year fix, a 5-year fix, a long-term fix? Because you're right, the investment of not only money into a technology or to an optimization, but the time that it takes to build those things out, to create processes, to train your team, to update your onboarding materials, all of the things that come with optimizations. It's a hard pill to swallow when you're going back 2 years later and you're changing that all over again. So I think if you're not doing a full, let's call it a scorecard or an evaluation as a change comes across your desk, to really understand that it's going to provide long-term value to your team, then you're doing yourself a little bit of a disservice, because at the end of the day, you are the one who has to do the work over again if the change happens again, right? It's just slowing down, really, like I said earlier, slowing down and evaluating it before, fulfilling the task that might come across your desk.
Yeah, slow down and move fast.
Yeah.
And then Tana and Rosalyn, I think Tana, you mentioned evaluating tools, technology. That's obviously a big part of the RevOps role. Rosalyn, you obviously are in a new role now, so are going through all that as well. And I think Tana, you mentioned having 9/10 coverage of like with one solution, or then maybe needing to go out and get another one. So I guess my question for both of you is, as you're evaluating new technology or maybe even like current technology to potentially solve problems that you have, do you need 100% coverage? Like, how should people actually be looking at the things that technology and solutions can solve for, right? Like and I know probably the initial answer is going to be it depends. It always depends. But how should people be thinking about that? And do you have examples where you've evaluated technology as a potential solution to a problem that you've had, and you've actually made decisions to maybe move forward with an existing product or a new tool because it did provide enough coverage for you to feel like you were getting value, but maybe not the full scope of everything that you wanted?
Sure, I think it's a give and take, right? Like you said, it just depends. What's top of mind right now is like, how can we make our team happier? Just coming, like, again, how can we continue to do more with less? How can we increase the efficiency? And so we're looking at AI. We mentioned that earlier is very big right now, along with auto dialers, and especially just the landscape changes so quickly. So looking at our sales development team as we continue to hire people from different companies, and they might have used an auto dialer in the past. And if we don't have one right now, they're like, I might be making 80 calls in a day, but not talking to 2 people. Do you understand how cumbersome and deflating like that can be for their role? So looking at things that can not only optimize and increase their efficiency, but ultimately make them happier. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what's top of mind for us right now.
No, I like that. It's quantitative and qualitative aspects of that, right? Like it may be easy for us to default to things like for cold calling, for example, what's your connect rate? How many dials did you make? But what you're not necessarily considering there is, like you said, can you imagine how it would feel if you make 80 calls in a day and literally no one answers? Like now imagine doing that 2 days in a row, and if that's your job, right? There is a big morale and confidence aspect of that. So makes complete sense.
Especially with a remote team, and
Yeah.
the typical makeup of a sales development rep might be newer in their career. So imagine you're a couple years out of college, you're making 80 phone calls a day and you're getting hung up on, and then your manager is in a different state and your team is in a different state, like, because there's so many AI coaching tools and resources now to bring teams more together that they can feel like they're closer together and a part of a tighter knit group.
Awesome. Awesome. Love that. I love the fact, I love the actually going back to the what's the outcome we're trying to achieve, right? Always taking a step back because you've seen, probably both have seen a lot of companies where, oh, we have a lead scoring problem, so that we got to buy a tool, right? Or we have a lead routing problem, buy a tool, right? Versus trying to understand holistically across your tech stack, but across your entire business. It's, hey, what are we trying to solve for? Where are those gaps? And then looking for technology that can actually solve multiple use cases. I think is really important. So let me move on to the next slide because I do want to cover, really talking a little bit about revenue orchestration, right? Which is, I guess, is a good segue because we're talking about platform versus point solutions. And I often think about RevOps as being the conductor for revenue, right? Similar to a conductor in an orchestra. I think of us as like that maestro, right? In the front, just keeping everybody aligned and keeping things in sync. And really making sure that each person and each team not only understands what the expectations are, but is doing their part in conjunction with the other teams. By having this really strong revenue orchestration, we can start to, move away from having misaligned goals to that more strategic alignment that we really all want across the business. And then with this better alignment, then we can start to drive that holistic, frictionless kind of customer journey versus having a siloed one. And I think as we talked about earlier, we need to move to a durable revenue growth model versus that kind of growth at all costs model. So tying all of these together, I think is one of the core foundational pillars that we need to really support this is quality, comprehensive, and accessible data. Right? Having the right data at the right time to the right people. And we all know how tough it can be, right, to do this, especially to not only get your data right, but across multiple functions and getting that cross-functional alignment, not just on data, but also people, process, tech. Having everybody have a single, people talk about the single source of truth, but I like to think about it as a single view of the business, right? That everyone's looking at the business the same way and everything underlying to support that is available. So I'm going to shift to maybe asking our panel really around, and maybe Tana, we can start with you, but can you share maybe an example of how you've successfully improved like this cross-functional alignment or collaboration between some of the teams? And what are some of those things that you would tell folks like, hey, these are some of the things that would really work to help drive some of that alignment?
Sure. What's really been a game changer for us is integrating the data to create a single source of truth. Historically, when the revenue operations function was in its infancy, like our sales leader had a different pipeline gap than our marketing leader. And that's just one example, but just that integration of data throughout sales, marketing, and CS to make sure that you're all looking at that consistent data. That's, I think, been the biggest game changer for us.
Ashley, what have you seen? Do you have an example of maybe how you've really driven some of that cross-functional alignment?
Yeah, I think I can think about it in a couple different ways, but I would say that the data was the first thing that came to mind for me too, Tana. At the end of the day, if you have your marketing team looking at a different set of data than your CEO from a revenue perspective, there's going to be some issues in alignment. And I think what we've done really well is over the course of the last couple of years, we've tried to streamline where those data points are coming from. So centralizing data with our business intelligence team through our IT team who supports our Salesforce instance, through revenue operations who is basically defining the KPIs for the business, and collaborating with all of those teams to ensure that what sales is putting into our database is measurable and that we can all align on the outcomes has been really important. I do think that going back to something we talked about earlier, that data is only valuable when it's accurate and when it's easy for the team to put it in the system and to keep it up to date and have less and less admin work. And so when you're talking about creating more efficiencies for the team, I think it's really important that you're evaluating any change that you make and saying, is this going to help or hurt my data collection? And if I do want to change this particular process, what KPI is measurable for me to know that this change is working, or how does it relate to the data that I might be missing? And so that isn't something you can create in a silo. You have to work with your partners and other departments to come to those conclusions most of the time. And that's something I think we do really well here.
I love that. Is there a process or maybe a workflow that you've actually streamlined or maybe automated to help drive some of that better alignment across the team?
Yeah, I think one that comes to mind that I think has been such a relief as I've been working here at Brightly is that when we have requests to change things within our Salesforce database, it goes through an IT team, and that IT team has selected process leads that sit within each one of the departments. So for example, sales operations would be me. We have a deal desk lead, somebody who sits in CSC. And anytime a change gets presented to them and or requested, those changes cannot be rolled out without collaboration with your process lead. I'm the one coming in and doing the UAT for those changes. I'm the one who is developing the change management strategy around it. I'm presenting those changes to our key stakeholders and just making sure that we are not, again, changing things in a silo that just impact one particular department and not thinking about how those things impact others. And so that process alone is one of many that I can think of that has helped us all be a little bit more knowledgeable about what other departments in the business need from an optimization standpoint and how they impact each other downstream.
That makes sense. I love the fact that you have an IT team to help you. I know a lot of early stage companies, we don't necessarily have as much of that support from some of the other teams. So it's great. But regardless, I think the process that you described by having subject matter experts reviewing and being involved and making sure that they're signing off, I think that is really a key factor in making sure that you keep that alignment
Definitely
working. Tana, is there something that maybe you've seen in terms of a process or workflow that you've streamlined or automated to really help some of that better alignment?
Yeah, we're constantly evolving the processes just for maximum efficiency. But one that we have implemented this year is the sales leadership team leads a pipeline excellence call with the sales leaders every month. And what we had found is like that feedback and what the sales leaders need by team, by account basis, that feedback wasn't always getting back to that cross-functional group from the marketing, the demand generation side, CS partners, just that overall cross-functional organization. And we created a demand management council that meets after the pipeline excellence call on a monthly basis to really bring that feedback back from the sales leaders to that cross-functional organization to say, hey, this VP of sales over this segment really needs help, and this is their go-to-market strategy for the upcoming quarter. How can the cross-functional team help to bring that alignment together? And so we've seen that's been really beneficial.
Yeah, I love that. I think that even if, for people who are maybe in the audience, you have a smaller team, you might not have as many resources, but just having a feedback loop or a mechanism by which a vehicle for this type of conversation and communication is really important. And even if it's just an email or a Slack channel or whatever the best newsletter, whatever the best form of communication that is effective for your organization, just having a vehicle by which people can have those discussions, have that buy-in, and then have those approvals, I think is really important. Sometimes setting up sometimes less is more, right? Not having to necessarily create some very robust or complex process, but just having something very simple to get started, right? And then you can build and improve. So we've been talking a lot about data. We've been talking about tech, of course, and process and change management, all the things that I think we live and breathe every day. But maybe how are you leveraging technology to help with some of this, unifying the data, enhancing some of the collaboration across the teams? We're obviously here with, we've talked a little bit about kind of SalesLoft's revenue orchestration platform. Like, how have you been leveraging maybe SalesLoft or other technologies to drive some of that? Tana, do we want to start with you?
Sure. We have definitely seen a game changer with the SalesLoft conversational intelligence. And Workiva operates in a matrix sales organization. And so when we execute on an opportunity, there's multiple people from the sales organization that are involved in that opportunity, from an SDR to pre-sales to a solution specialist to a solution consultant to the account executive. And so there might be 5 people on the execution team. And then of course, that's not even looking at leadership. And so just the ability to record those conversations throughout the life cycle of that opportunity has brought alignment together in a very positive way. And just the ability to translate that to different languages and just the high level insights that we're able to get out of that has been very beneficial for our global sales team.
I love that. I love that. Ashley, how are you leveraging, I guess, tech really to unify data, right? And driving some of that alignment?
Yeah, I think the first thing, like I alluded to before, is finding a technology where your sales team can live and function and complete most of their day-to-day tasks, just to ensure that the admin side of their job is really well defined and easy, right? Because at the end of the day, if you're going to ask them to put a data set in this technology and a data set in this technology, it's not going to be sustainable. I think that we have leveraged quite a bit of automation, and particularly with SalesLoft, to help us with our relationship with marketing. And for an example, when a new lead or what we call an MQL comes through our routing tool, we've been leveraging some of SalesLoft's automation in relationship to that routing tool to help us meet our SLAs, to help us with quick delivery of results and communication to prospects. And these are all things that we were able to accomplish on the revenue operations side in alignment with what marketing and what sales need. I think it's just about finding the right process that you want to try to streamline that impacts multiple different departments. And then finding, again, one source of truth to collect that data and ensure that you have a really good view of the business, like you said before. I think that, again, if you're not really planning out the processes and how it impacts the other departments, it's hard to collaborate on them. And so it takes really well thought out conversations and plans and really looking at it from every single lens before automating, although most of the things that we're automating today benefit more than just one department.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, I think taking a step back and just a process first, right? It's always process. It's always getting a really strong process. How do we actually want this to work, right? Before you can figure out how to automate it. I'm going to actually stop sharing, but I did want to maybe tie into what you were just talking about, figuring out that process and figuring out what it is that's going to have that big impact. And maybe Ashley, can you walk us through maybe a very like a specific initiative that maybe where you've leveraged SalesLoft? I know you're both SalesLoft customers, right? So maybe where SalesLoft really helped you drive some of this durable growth that we've been talking about. And then what are some of those efficiency gains maybe that you've seen?
Yeah, one of the major initiatives is always going to be about product rollout, right? You have a new product that you want to bring to the market, and you want to be able to communicate a effective message to multiple different personas. And for our business, we work in multiple different verticals, different personas per vertical. And so we've leveraged SalesLoft to help us streamline a process around product enablement and go-to-market strategies. And for example, when we have a new market, we work with our sales team, or product to go to market. We work with our sales team to identify what KPIs within our cadences we want to measure. What personas or contacts do we want to add to those cadences? What structure do we want those cadences to look like? And we do all of this work behind the scenes to basically hand over the product enablement or product communication to the sales team on a silver platter with a bow on it, right? So all they really need to do is understand, obviously, the talking tracks, who our personas are, what is the product release information or enablement. But from an operational perspective, they have a lot of what they need already at their fingertips, and they don't have to worry about recreating the wheel every time we have a product release. And this is just something that we are now in the flow of doing, but we had to build that process first to get to this point, and we knew SalesLoft could help us get there. And so that's been a huge efficiency gain, and something I think that the team really enjoys, to have that streamlined approach for every product release.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Just the fact that you can have all the information available is huge. Tana, maybe I'd like to shift to you maybe do you have a specific initiative maybe that you've seen sort of success through SalesLoft in terms of driving that durable revenue and maybe driving some of those efficiencies?
I think this is just a really generic answer, but it just comes back to the consistency and the global sales team using one tool
Yeah.
to do that like it seems
Yeah,
so
don't
obvious.
underestimate the power of that, right? And the impact.
Right. And just the visibility at the account level, because from the customer experience perspective, there's just so many people that are potentially like touching the customer, from marketing automations to sales to inside sales and the SDR team to customer success. And so just really being able to have that single source of truth, that just for consistency, which I know that many engagement and revenue engagement tools can do, but that, along with what I said, just the conversational intelligence that with so many people operating in the sales cycle, the ability to send those recordings to other people that might be key stakeholders in that, back to the customer engagement. When you jump on with a vendor that you're evaluating, you don't necessarily want 5 people from your own organization involved in that, because it's like you're stepping all over each other's toes. So how do you really utilize that call recording to help share that knowledge from the various calls throughout the sales cycle with other key stakeholders that are involved in that opportunity has really been beneficial.
Yeah, I love that. I think the worst thing that could happen is when you get on the phone with a customer and then they ask the same exact questions that somebody else already asked. We talk a lot about this on the handoff process from once they become a customer and then they move on to implementation or with customer success or with an account manager. And then they have to, the worst thing you could do is ask them, okay, what are your main goals? Why did you buy? Right? Not have that information at your fingertips. So yeah, I think having that just consistent data across and available to everybody on the team is really important. I'm going to shift gears just a little bit around, I think about RevOps and we talk about this orchestration and this journey and trying to, we're talking about a lot of different things that they need to go manage, but maybe if you look back right now and think about what piece of advice would you give to other RevOps leaders or folks who are on the call who are sort of just starting and think about, hey, how do I even get started? Everything you're saying makes a whole lot of sense. I'd love to get there, but I'm not there yet. So is there any advice that you would give based on your experience to folks that are listening?
I can start. I think if you don't truly understand what you're trying to accomplish and make a manageable plan around that, it's almost impossible to know where to start. And so I've said this several times, but it's easy to implement and to pass a tool off to your team and move on to the next project. But if you don't really have a really great program plan around your investment, and by investment, I mean in the technology, the time, the resources, it could result in just you doing that work all over again, and most times sooner rather than later. And so within that program plan, I really advise for you to have a clear enablement plan, a clear KPI plan. And then once you are done in your role, making sure that you have someone managing the program long term. Prime example with SalesLoft is when I came into Brightly, it was what we still call the Wild Wild West. It was being managed by our SDR leadership team, and there was no operational or enablement support behind it. My goal was to clean that up. And now I have a program manager who manages all day-to-day technology needs, the relationship with SalesLoft as a vendor. And we did all of that by establishing a clear plan and what we wanted to accomplish and outlining that for our team, and then having him continue to just maintain that as we go. And I don't think that would have been possible if we hadn't have done the planning at the beginning. And we do that truly with every change or every technology implementation we do. So that is my biggest advice to someone who is coming into RevOps or trying to reshape your RevOps org, is project management and project planning is a game changer for you.
Yeah, definitely. We had a question in the chat and I want to make sure I get to that because actually, since we're on this topic you mentioned around your process for that product releases. And the question from Catherine is really, can you explain how SalesLoft really helped you with that process? And then how did you actually leverage SalesLoft specifically for it?
Yeah, I think historically product releases were happening in silos, and for us, they were very verticalized. So you have a product marketer who works with a specific team, and they do all of their communications in that silo. And so what we decided to do is create a process where all product releases, particularly the cadences and the messaging around a product release, goes through operations. Operations will assist in creating the cadences that are needed for that particular release based off of personas, product, talk tracks, all of those different things. And then parallel to that, we're creating the KPIs that we pull out of SalesLoft, and we pull those into Salesforce through our BI tools, a bunch of different ways to see if we are seeing success within that release. And so we're leveraging the tool itself to ensure that the right personas are getting the right messaging, that the team is following the steps that we as a team determine are important within a cadence based off of our collaboration with marketing. And then to ensure that nothing is happening outside of the system, like a phone call through your cell phone or an email through Outlook that we can't track. Having it all be under one umbrella allows us to make sure that we have a full understanding of what's working and what's not working around the product release, and truthfully around any sales play that you might want to release.
That's great. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Tana, maybe shifting the question to you, what advice would you give to other RevOps leaders or professionals that are thinking about this revenue orchestration journey?
Sure. I think it's just what can you do to identify like where is the biggest area of opportunity in that cross-functional alignment? And then out of all of those, what's a good starting point? Just like analyzing where you're going to get that biggest ROI as a start. Get a few wins under your belt to build up that momentum. Going back to what we've been talking about of just analyzing the tech stack and identifying where can you start to make that biggest ROI. It's almost what you mentioned earlier, like having that long-term vision. It's almost if you want to renovate your house, you have to have that long-term vision of what you want that house to look like.
Yeah.
And then you might start in the bathroom and then in the kitchen and then in the bedroom, right? But it's if you do it in pieces without that vision, you're going to have inconsistent colors and flooring. And it's like, what do you want that pathway or that ultimate workflow or vision to look like? And then just work backwards from that.
I love that house analogy because it's a great way to think about it, right? Because you could like, oh, I really want this bathroom to be this way and start building and then nothing connects, right? Which I think we've seen that when to Ashley's point about the wild, wild west, I think we all felt a little bit of that. Maybe one more question before we hand it back to Matt. I think this is the time of year, right? When we're doing planning. We're kicking off planning. If you're not, or hopefully if you're really ahead and you're already way ahead of others. I know a couple folks are actually done with their plans, which is crazy right now in December, but good for them. And these are folks that have a January kind of ending their Q4. But a lot of teams right now are looking at planning. They're looking at their budgets for next year. Obviously, technology is going to be a big part of that assessment. So how are you both thinking about your tech stack? And I guess maybe what's next for you and for SalesLoft in your businesses?
Yeah, happy to jump in. I think specific to SalesLoft, like we're not necessarily utilizing the rhythm functionality to operationalize our workflows. So that's a key focus area, but just really continuing to look at technologies to optimize our operations. I mentioned a few of them earlier, like how can we increase our efficiency, increase our productivity, and make our team happier? Those are what's top of mind in budget season.
Got it. Any suggestion for folks to say like, hey, if they're going to, it's a little bit of daunting task to look at your tech stack, like, where do I even start?
I think just where is there overlap? What's like I mentioned a few tools earlier, but what can we put on top of SalesLoft to even fuel the fire that SalesLoft brings to our teams? Like I mentioned, some of the AI capabilities and auto dialers is what we're looking at to help SalesLoft even more.
Got it. So instead of looking for new tech, but really take a look at what you already have and what you're not fully maybe utilizing, because I think that's probably you're already paying for it, right? It's like, we're already paying for this tool. Are we fully, are we leveraging all of the functionality, and how can we leverage more of it better for next year? Kind of that doing more with less. Well, Ashley?
Yeah, lucky for me, I'm already in Q1 of 2025.
Nice. So you've already gone through the pain.
Yeah, well ahead of the game. No, I think this year we are in full optimization mode. And what I mean by that is just looking at the technology we already own and either figuring out what we are using or not using within the technology, or maybe evaluating no longer keeping that technology. I think that's a big part of it. But there are a lot of technologies that have so many different features and so many different things that we just haven't really been able to spend the time and enable on. This year, we really want to focus on that. So, the growth has changed, slowed down for us a little bit. Our team is a little bit in a change management fatigue right now. So we're trying to really think of how to just make this a more efficient and optimized process for them. And that's leveraging all of the components within our technology. For SalesLoft in particular, we are working on building and maintaining our cadence committee. And so that's going to be in collaboration with our marketing team, our CSM team, sales operations, and working with our CSM from SalesLoft to help with looking at the library of cadences we have today and either removing what's no longer working, tagging them appropriately, just again, handing our team like that silver platter approach of you have a persona who is meeting this particular talk track. Here is the cadence that you should put them in. So we want to evolve that over time. It's going to take time because we're still cleaning out the database to not be the Wild West anymore. And so once we build out that library, I think it's going to be even more efficient than it is for our sellers today. So that's the number one initiative for SalesLoft.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you. Let me just share one more slide here in case for folks who want to learn more about revenue orchestration platforms. Here's an easy, I think everyone's doing QR codes these days, so it's an easy way to scan. And Matt, I'll let you go ahead and wrap up.
So thank you to everyone for attending. As you exit, you will be prompted to fill out a just 2-question survey with feedback from the event today. If you could do that, that would be awesome. Leverage the QR code that you see on your screen here if you want to get that blueprint that Rosalyn had mentioned. And then just want to say a big thank you to Rosalyn, Ashley, and Tana for dropping some knowledge on the folks that were in the audience today, and to all the attendees. Thank you very much as well. But that's all we got for you. Top of the hour now, so I'll let you all run. Thank you very much, and have a good rest of your day. I'll see you later, y'all.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.